The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards the
most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts. This is Toby Manhire. We're back with Gone By Lunchtime. Special thanks to Flick Electric who make this podcast and all of our politics coverage on the Spin-off possible. Click through from any politics post on the Spin-off and see what a sweet deal you can get from Flick Electric. Thanks, Flick. Annabelle Lee is here with a wonderful cup of tea. Annabelle Lee Mather. Kia ora.
Kia ora. You have made a spectacular cup of tea, Tobe, I have to say. Me mihi kia koe ka tika.
Ben Thomas is there with a cup of coffee. How's that suiting you so far, Ben?
Good to be back in the big smoke.
Ben's been away too.
With this Auckland style. Is this an espresso? What is this?
Similar.
Is it
Similar. It's come out of one of those big things that you press down and it makes slightly flatulent noises as it puts the coffee into the mug.
Oh, right.
Never even heard of one of those.
How have you been making your coffee in the bush, Ben?
In a billy, on the fire.
Yeah,
that's right.
While singing a song.
Yeah.
Yep. Learned how to make fires the Tuhoi way or the Waikato Moana way.
How's that?
Kind of, you sort of put logs on either side and then you stuff the middle with paper and then you put the kindling as kind of thatched roof over the top.
So as in kind of meeting in an apex at the top?
No,
or
it's not
flat, like a
flat,
barbecue?
Flat, it's not an A-frame.
I wonder if that's a very good... I wouldn't want to question...
I'm not even, entering into this.
Get into any trouble. But what have you been doing, Ben?
Just enjoying the bush, seeing a lot of trees, a lot of birds.
What are you doing there? Can you tell us?
Just hanging out with my friends at Tuhoi.
You're working...
Doing a bit of work.
You're sort of on secondment type thing. Having a good time.
Have you seen a huia? There's rumours that there's huia in Te Urewera. You know that, eh?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of delicious kereru.
Oh, yes.
I am I believe in the mission of caring for nature, which Tuhoi, have, for their whenua, Te Urewera, from whence they came, the children of the mist. But I have a broader conservation ambit now in my life, which is I feel like maybe if we protected the noble kereru to the extent that they flourished again in New Zealand treetops and nature, maybe we could all just have one each a year. Just,
Yep, I totally hear you.
How many
I hear what you're saying.
kereru have you barbecued on that Urewera fire?
No, I'm a law respecter. I respect our tuakana, the kereru. But maybe if it was just fine, maybe we could all just have one.
I've heard
and
that.
if you didn't want yours, maybe I could have that one as well. The kereru, it's got an interesting place in Te Ao Māori, I feel like.
The old illegal teagle.
It's the Māori honey trap. When Sonny Toe, R.I.P. Sonny Toe.
He's not dead. But
Sonny Toe, who has resigned from the Ngāpuhi Runanga.
In mysterious circumstances.
In Tōrunuku. He was busted a while ago with, 2 or 3 kereru on a flight back from Invercargill. Now,
shot in the South Island where Ngāi Tahu have a policy of total protection of their kiriru.
Except the thing is, right, you know, you've been on domestic flights, you know, in regional airports. You can take a machete on board. There's no security screening. Like, you could take knives, a gun, explosives. So, and yet there was a tip-off that Sonny had these 3 birds. And so, you know, this was a setup, right?
Ben, are you now the mayor of Urewera?
No, Turewera crosses a couple of local districts. Whakatane, with Judy Turner, the former United Future deputy leader, is now the mayor of Whakatane. And a guy called Craig Little is still the mayor of Wairoa.
Well, that's interesting.
I didn't check whether Toi Iti, Tame's son, got onto the Whakatane
He had a
District
good
Council.
campaign.
He was the one. Yeah, he was the one encouraging people
defaced
to
his
draw
billboard
dicks.
with a cock and balls,
Yeah.
and he used that, leveraged that even. He leveraged the cock and the balls to promote his own campaign for.
Is that Toi
Council.
and Tamea
Toi,
both on the council? Awesome. I've always thought, wouldn't it be so cool, you know, when you go to those big signings for like memorandums of understandings, or I've often said this to my husband who has signed quite a few, why don't just for fun, draw a cock and balls?
Yeah. And
I've
what-
never been
what
able
is-
to convince him. No,
No,
he's not into it,
right.
but I'm just like, it would just, you know, make it a really memorable special event.
Yeah.
It's like, it's got more meaning.
Do you
They,
mention
they
If it's got a
should-
cock and balls, don't you think?
that will come up in litigation at some point. You know, there'll be like, you know, an urgent application to the Waitangi Tribunal. They're like, look, bring the Crown into Imatau. This was, you know, you say it was full and final, but look, on page 8, what's that? It's
Or
like-
if it was Pania that got to draw a big cock and ball, would it just be?
Do you
it'd
mean
be
sort
special.
of try and smuggle it in, or do you mean do it?
No,
just say,
just
no,
do it-
that's my
just do
signature.
it
There it is.
serious, like,
There it is.
there you go.
There you go. That's how it works. Okay.
What? Come at me. What?
No, it
Like
seems
that?
like I can't see
Like
any
that?
issues. I can't see any issues there. That's a good idea.
Hey, if you love the spin-off, the best way to show it is to become part of the spin-off members. It's fun that helps keep us free and accessible to all without a paywall, and it funds some of our most important and respected journalism. You can pay whatever you like, but for $8 a month, you'll receive a package including our first book and a tote bag, I think, if you're into that. But wait, there's more. For a very limited time, fans of Gone By Lunchtime can get a super limited edition button badge when they sign up using this special URL. Here it goes, thespinoff.co.nz/Gone By Lunchtime. That's thespinoff.co.nz/Gone By Lunchtime.
In the local elections, Peter Jackson had a heavy involvement at Wellington. Justin Lester was one of the few incumbents, I think, that got turfed by the finest of margins, a few hundred votes. And Andy Foster, a sort of a man who's been around for many, many, many years.
27 years.
Does that mean
Wellington
he's
local
going
body
to fuck up
elections.
the council building as well? Are we going to get the horror that is fucking Auckland Airport, or Wellington Airport, with all that hobbit shit in it? Is that what he's going to do to like the council buildings? Or we're going to have like?
Peter Jackson isn't actually the mayor.
I know, but like his influence.
It would be terrible if he ruined those beautiful council buildings, which right now stand across from the art gallery and the big giant hand with a face on it. What if this affects Wellington's reputation as the classy cultural capital of New Zealand?
Oh, I quite like the hand. But we could definitely have that desolation of smog bird perched on top of the index finger or something.
Yeah,
That would
I feel
definitely
like
just-
that's what's going to happen.
Just like we're the workshop and we come in, we're gonna sex up this hand now. Just do finger puppets or something designed by Richard. What's his name? Taylor.
It might all end up in like Gandalf hats or something. It's part of the Merrill robes.
Andy Foster has formerly stood for Parliament for the National Party, and then I think when he wasn't selected, he stood for the New Zealand First Party.
He's New Zealand First aligned now.
And he has stood, I think, 9 times, including for the mayor 3 times, and then it's
Can't
almost
buy
like
perseverance. So
absolutely just stick around. Stick around, and you never know. One day, a perfect storm might happen, insofar as there might be a massive squabble over a harbourfront development. There might be a man who owns most of a peninsula and suburb and who has previously been quite influential in changing the law of the country, makes some movies, has some big train sets, has an air force, and he might throw his weight behind you.
You might be his guy.
And before you know it, you might be the mayor of Wellington.
Yeah, that's right. And look, I've seen a lot of negative commentary about Peter Jackson's involvement here. But look, in the lead up to the local government elections, the spin-off ran its policy tool and devoted, the talents of, about 3 or 4 people part-time trying to get up interest in local body politics.
Yes.
And now that Peter Jackson becomes interested, suddenly that's a bad thing.
I see.
He's just taking an interest. Just, sitting down with a 2B5 notebook to rank all the permutations for DHB voting lists, and also writing out a check for $36,000 to this hobbit-looking individual who's now the mayor. That's fine.
Peter Jackson and Fran
Walsh
are the donors through various means. Not clear exactly how, but, they haven't hidden it. They've put some billboards up. And Leicester has also had the misfortune, I suppose you could say, of it seems like taking a lot of the blame for the complete fucking omnishambles of the Wellington buses, which, of course, the Wellington City Council doesn't run. It's a regional council thing. Although he was on the radio on Sunday, we're talking Monday, he was on the radio on Sunday, and he was saying he decided not to if he'd wanted to, he could have tried to point the finger at the regional council, but then that wouldn't have been good for building relationships. But I kind of think under the circumstances, perhaps a little bit of pointing the finger / hollering at full volume at the regional council to make it very clear that it's not his fault might have been
the thing is,
the idea.
The thing is, Justin Lester's out of touch. He's always he was always tweeting pictures of himself riding an Onzo bike around the waterfront, when in fact all Wellingtonians, and particularly all Wellingtonians who vote in local body elections, take the bus. Our Auckland listeners might not realise this, but Wellington is like this sort of bizarro world where, when I moved up to Auckland, I would take the train to work, from Wellington. And I was one of about 3 people on the train wearing a suit, and the other 2 people were other Wellingtonians who had come up to work in government relations in Auckland, and we all knew each other. Whereas, down in Wellington, it's totally ordinary to see chief executives of government departments or deputy secretaries of the civil service, on the number 3 to Karori, and so there, the public transport, you can effectively ignore public transport as a local body politician in Auckland, because these people don't vote. They, but in Wellington, it's a big deal. Journalists are tweeting about it. It's it's much more of a catastrophe. Auckland's had terrible public transport for years, but nobody's ever noticed or paid any attention.
Somewhat of a fuck up on Leicester's part, right? Like, you don't get any brownie points for taking that approach. He's been punished for it.
No, that's right.
He should have been screaming it from the hilltops.
And he was involved in this, the secret letter. The purloined letter from Julianne Genter from him to Julianne Genter, what was it? Julianne Genter to
Julianne Genter to Phil Twyford.
I
kind of feel as though that's possibly not I'm not saying it didn't make a difference at the margins, but I think there are a couple of national MPs have been trying to make the case that this is what brought Leicester down. And
it's not that
issue. It's not that issue of the cover up, but actually those priorities that were agreed with the government by Leicester's own admission, were not his first choice for transport priorities. Again, Wellingtonians take all of this stuff very seriously, pay a lot more attention to it, I think, generally than Aucklanders, long-term plans and things like that. Because they're all public servants, right? They love reading reports, and so it's Leicester has only got himself to blame. Peter Jackson could have ploughed $100,000 in or $150,000. Leicester has the advantage of incumbency, name recognition, Labour volunteers, carpeting the fucking city, and you shouldn't be able to dislodge an incumbent mayor like that. And $36,000 certainly isn't enough. So. as is usually the case, Leicester lost it rather than Foster winning.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is probably something to be said, though, as well, that its incumbency normally is an advantage when you're in a city that's got all these buildings that are closed for earthquake repairs. You've got an absolutely fucked bus, and you've got a little bit of a just kind of slight kind of, I don't know, just a slight kind of doldrums feel a bit about the town. Then maybe that is not always a huge advantage. Anyway, Andy Foster. Moving north in Auckland,
Never give up on your dreams.
Phil Goff will not give up on his dreams, and that's about being a dependable, modest. He's not going to frighten anyone. But he did it quite easily in the end. Bales, he did more than double Tami Here.
Yeah.
What did you make of the whole campaign? It was kind of unusual, right?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all by the result. I thought that he would probably give Tami Here a good thumping. I think it was, kind of, if you've followed Tami Here's career, it's pretty bog standard stuff. He's quite a volatile character, and I think that came through during the campaign. Like, he's very reactive. It's very easy to distract him and pull him off message, and he will totally take the bait every time, so I'm not surprised at all. I think the thing that saddens me about the Auckland election is just how piss poor the voter turnout was, and I reckon that just comes down to two things, which is kaupapa and candidacy, and neither of those candidates set the world on fire. There was no sort of super outstanding, interesting, exciting new candidates like we've seen in places like Wellington with, the amazing Tamitha Paul. And if you want to know more about Tamitha, you can check out a story that the Hui did about her last year on the News Hub website.
She's like early 20s.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Wave, very cool.
Yeah, a remarkable young wahine Māori who was on the Vic Student Association. I think the first Māori woman, maybe the first Māori to ever win that role. And she comes from Tokoroa. She's whip smart, very cool. And I don't think we've seen, super exciting candidates coming through in Auckland, and certainly not in the Mayoralty. When Tom Sainsbury drinking Make Vu in drag is the most exciting and logical option.
We had Craig Lord. Craig Lord, who if you haven't noticed Craig Lord, he kind of he's a quite surprising, interesting, curious individual who spent a lot of time berating the media for not being taken more seriously with his harebrained ideas. But he ended up registering about as many votes as Chloe Swarbrick got last time round. So, I mean,
in a way, he's got a fair complaint because people did take Tamahiri's harebrained schemes seriously and report them at length. So, the 40-lane Harbour Bridge or 0800 Jacinda, whatever.
Yeah. The Harbour Bridge maybe wasn't as implausible as some people thought. But anyway, I mean, there's definitely
But still, Tom's one was better because he was going to have 19 lanes instead of 18 lanes.
Do
so
you
there
think
you
we
go.
could call you talk about the poor quality of candidates in local government, and I think that's 100% correct. I think I'm a long-standing proponent of abolishing local government entirely and replacing it with a Department of Parks and Sewage run out of Wellington with local branch officers to respond to communities.
Yeah.
Because you see these races are fought on such a narrow bandwidth. Somebody says, I'm going to cut rates, and somebody says, their competition says, I'm going to cut the rate of increase of rates. And, and really what you're arguing about is the narcissism of small differences of 0.5% of rate increases per year.
Yeah.
And somebody says they'll, what was it, between Tamahiri and Goff, Tamahiri said he'd bring the Crown-controlled organisation, the council-controlled organisations to heel, and Goff said he would order a review of them. I mean, it's just all of this incremental tinkering stuff because of the way that it's set up. The mayor in Auckland is still only one vote. They have about 4 staffers. So as part of the super city, it's very hard for them to force their own agenda through not just the council, but then the Auckland the council, the governing body, but then the actual organisation of the council, which is run by a chief executive and actually can largely set its own agenda. And so you can see why people sort of aren't inspired, in these areas. But the other thing that we need to look at is the quality of joke candidates in our elections, because they're piss poor, they're not funny. Tom Sainsbury, he's a funny guy, does good videos for the spin-off, but putting on a wig and saying his name's Muriel or whatever and vote for me, don't waste everyone's time, man. Like, go back to, spill it, like, find out what really happened with, Jacinda and Trump at the the last, the UN, like, tell us that. Like, that's what I want to hear. A bit more Vodafone Music Awards fucking gossip. Like, but,
There's also the fact that with there's such a mishmash of different types of systems, and STV in some places and not in others. And, in Auckland, for example, we were asked to rank the candidates for the district health board from 1 to 27.
I like that. Yeah, I really like the single transferable vote system.
Such a nerd system, though.
But I feel like you get to vote for what you actually want. I think one of the problems with MMP, and I've said it before, is people sort of overthink it, and instead of voting for what they want, they vote to keep out what they think they don't want. And the nice thing about STV is you can actually, vote in order of what you...
Number. 27, there we go. And the rest is random.
I actually did vote in the local body elections on Saturday afternoon with about 45 minutes left, just so that I could rank one of the candidates 27.
Can I just stop you there? It was noon that the polls shut. So
what did I say?
Saturday afternoon.
Oh, Saturday morning.
Right,
it's all blur.
Okay.
So
I did vote.
Oh, me? Well, I don't know.
I care about democracy.
Well,
fact checking our fucking podcast.
I care about democracy despite
accuracy.
The complete abolition of local government.
Truth.
I think it's in terms of the whole low voter turnout. Not only is it just about quality of candidates, selling a vision that's exciting but also achievable, and having the right kaupapa. But I also think it's about media coverage, and I think the spin-off did a really outstanding job on, providing information in a way that was easy to consume and understandable and all of that sort of stuff. But I do think, that is where we've, the old, local rags that we used to have back in the day. It is, I think you feel their loss during local body elections, because kind of the day rolls up and you're like, hang on a minute, who are these?
Yeah.
And you're kind of rifling through that pamphlet and you're trying to figure out who's who, and even that pamphlet, it's sort of not very clear about what their key policies are. It's I feel like they need to be curated a bit, because some of them are so touchy-feely, some of them are so left field, and
someone else drew attention to this, but in the candidate's leaflet for Wellington, Andy Foster, who was elected mayor, leaps about 3 or 4 times back from first person to third person.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Andy Foster is a committed citizen of Colburn.
Yes, I am.
I am. It's like, what's going on?
That's because it was directed by Peter Jackson. It's a Smeagol Gollum thing, It's
wow. Well, I hadn't thought of it like that, but now it clearly is The Hobbit Part 4.
But when the local body elections come around and Hamilton ends up looking like a way cooler place to live than Auckland, you're like...
Yeah. Look, that's probably enough. Did anyone else have anything else to say about local elections? In Dunedin, Aaron Hawkins, who hitchhikes to work, came through.
Can I just say the names of...
Aaron Hawkins, great dude, great guy. But, I mean,
gets him for a third term.
Shows a bit how STV works, right, in that he was behind much of the way through. But then in final preferences, won by a narrow margin. So what you get is the most agreeable candidate will win, rather than... or maybe the least disagreeable candidate will win. So
the polarising candidate is less likely, right?
Yeah. You can argue about the merits of that,
in fact, in Dunedin, Aaron Hawkins won because, I'm just trying to find this note that somebody sent me, he ended up getting the votes from a former golf pro who is strongly pro-oil exploration. So the votes from that candidate ended up jumping over to Hawkins at the last moment, and he beat Van der Watt-Doodle. So there you go. Bells, did you have something else to say about that?
No, I was just going to say it's cool to see lots of Māori coming through.
Yep, it's been a
Not in Auckland,
shift
but
a
in
bit
other
in that
places.
direction, and more women mayors is good.
More ladies
Good to have some lady mayors.
rocking the mayoral chains.
Kia ora. Sorry for this interruption. It's Alice Neville here. I am the food editor at The Spin-Off, and I just wanted to pop in and tell you about our food podcast, Dietary Requirements, hosted by me, Simon Day, and Sophie Gilmore. It celebrates all there is to know about eating and drinking. There's cooking tips, there's special guests, there's what we've been eating and drinking lately, and we try not to chew into the microphone too much. So if you like food and drink, listen in. You won't regret it. It's at thespinoff.co.nz and all your favourite podcast providers.
We are speaking on Monday afternoon, and I'm ahead of what's expected to be a One News poll tonight, but there was a News Hub poll last night, which was given the shot of adrenaline with the end of Jacinda Mania, and Mike Hosking this morning on the radio said that the rot has set in and that the ship is sinking and so on.
How, on that ecstatic scale,
Yes.
how ecstatic is the Hosk?
The Hosk was pretty fucking happy.
Like over the fucking moon, or just like elated?
I think there was quite a lot of drool. Like, I think there was probably like a kind of 50-cent piece pool of drool on the desk. So not a kind of lake.
Yeah.
Just like a little
Just goblets,
like
little.
I think there's room for it to grow. I think the
Tonight. We'll...
and the results were that it was plummeting but Labour did drop a lot since the last News Hub poll to 41.6 from 50ish. Nets were up to 43.9. Blah 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 blah. Still on those numbers though, because New Zealand First didn't make it over the threshold of 5. A Labour Green coalition would be government, right? And maybe because of the space in between polls, the whole plummet talk is a little bit hyperbolic.
Look, the News Hub poll was in line with every other poll that there has been since the budget, including TV1's own polls, TV1's polls. That News Hub poll was, I think, is accepted to be either a bit of an outlier or captured a moment in time when the Prime Minister was really cresting that, March post-March wave.
Although the
budget.
Reid research polls for News Hub have been pretty good. They've been they were closer around election time than Colma's one. So,
Look. So either it was an outlier at the time, or it captured this moment in time when Ardern was really sort of at her peak. Most polls have Labour and National sort of within 2 points of each other either way. The Greens hanging around at 5 or 6, and New Zealand First falling below 5. So there's nothing really chilling. I mean, the government will be very pleased with that. That puts them.
Do you think?
That puts them ahead. I mean, look, where the danger is that with New Zealand First on less than 5. Winston Peters will be starting to get a bit worried about the next election. And we've already seen New Zealand First acting out a lot when they need media attention. And I think it will become increasingly difficult for the government to govern, as a coalition as they head towards the election.
And we've seen a bit of that lately. I mean, New Zealand First, as sure as day follows night, as the election grows closer, will start to push the differentiation factors, and we've seen Shane Jones, very intelligent man, presumably quite deliberately, go and speak at that forestry dinner and start, let's say, to put it charitably, blurring the line between a senior party member and a cabinet minister. They need to push that. That's part of the strategy, right? To push that line closer and closer and try and carve out a patch. Even, who knows, to get someone fired from cabinet or to end up. I mean, it's a tricky one. They need to do something because it's a party that almost in its bones is oppositional.
Who New Zealand First are.
Yeah,
but I mean, they always do sort of bounce back around the election, don't they? But I feel like
Well,
the
no,
difference this time is...
They've been in government twice before, and both times they've come under 5% in
Yeah.
the next election. So this idea that they sort of the triennial bloom of Winston Peters has not applied when they've been in government. The other thing which people should be keeping a very close eye on is the resignation of the party president. And he said that the reason was that he didn't feel comfortable signing off their annual returns, and said that he didn't have a sound enough knowledge of their donations.
I was going to say, that's the difference this time. Like they have crapped out before. Usually they do bounce back, but like you say, they're a fractured party this time around.
Well, I don't think that the split between the membership and the party, the parliamentary party, is very important at all.
Are you referring there to the leaked documents?
Leaked documents about membership stuff. Because I don't, to be honest, I don't think that the party has any damaging information on Winston Peters. Because I think, as alluded to by the president, the party doesn't get to be included in anything that matters in the New Zealand First Party. It's all run from the top.
But I think there's also some tensions around, issues such as Shane Jones' behaviour and, how the party list is formed and those sorts of things. So I think they're going to be struggling to keep inside their whare clean this time before they even get to the election.
The very fact of those leaks, like they have to have come from someone who's reasonably senior, right? Like pretty senior. Admittedly, they don't come immediately up to the present day, so there may be someone who's been away for a while. But that sort of stuff, especially if it continues, there's been 2 sort of tranches of leaks. If there are more, those things do become incredibly destabilising. We've seen it before, just as a kind of chipping away at this kind of... And even if that's true, if you've got quite a kind of central command in the party, obviously Winston carries a huge amount of money and power in the party, even then that chipping away can become quite damaging over time.
I think it's something of a red herring. I think the most interesting thing that has come out is the president's disquiet over donations, because as we know, New Zealand First, everyone sort of accepts that they have links with the fishing industry, with the racing industry. That's accepted as an article of faith, but we never see large donations declared by New Zealand First. We never have in their entire history. And Winston Peters always said that's because we don't accept corporate donations, we don't accept big donations, we have cake stalls. Now in 2008, it turned out that wasn't true, and that there had been a $50,000 donation by Owen Glenn, the millionaire, and there had been a $25,000 donation from Bob Jones, the property developer. And there was a lot of kind of static and toing and froing, and Winston Peters holding up a no sign saying that he had never received, and the party had never received donations from those rich people. Ultimately, the Privileges Committee of Parliament found that Winston Peters had knowingly filed an incorrect return for his pecuniary interests register, and that he was aware of those donations to cover his legal fees. So, things that probably should have been declared and that the donors themselves believed were donations to the New Zealand First Party. Now, obviously, nothing like that has come up right now. But there is, I think Daniel McLaughlin mentioned in his piece for the spin-off, there is this entity called the New Zealand First Foundation that has loaned the New Zealand First Party $200,000 in the last couple of years. And nobody knows anything about what the New Zealand First Foundation is. So I think that question about donations, if there is anything more to come on that, is much, much more interesting than some disgruntled rank and file members who are mad that they went with Labour, not National.
Just coming back to the poll, I wouldn't underestimate how concerned Labour would be with the results. I think that they've been through a really rough period at a time when they're supposed to be delivering on their key policy issues. So I'm not surprised by the poll at all, but I do think that it is cause for concern. One of the things that I think is interesting about it is how ACT's support has doubled, and I thought, gosh, does that mean that this is a bit of an outlier poll that he can suddenly double? But then I realised, when you've got 5 supporters and then you get 5 more, it kind of doubles. So I guess that's just to do with his end of life bill.
I think ACT will pick up a little bit because they're the only ones opposing, or they've been the most strident in opposing the gun changes. And it's really interesting. You know, guns aren't something that I think about at all because I think it's kind of psychotic to own something to kill people. But, you know...
They'd say, do you have a knife, Ben? Do you own knives, Ben?
Don't own them to kill people,
so,
to be fair.
Well, and this is what a surprising number of people have been telling me recently. You know, and there's a lot of people who feel very strongly about this stuff and feel like, you know, they've been sort of left high and dry politically, particularly by, say, New Zealand First.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that it could pick up 1-2% on that.
It's also that kind of difficult position that they sometimes try and navigate between the kind of conservative versus the classical liberal economic position. You know, and some of the rhetoric has always been mixed, especially going back to the Rodney Hyde and the John Banks days. But if they can sort of pull off a strategy whereby they can pick up a bit of the disaffected conservative vote, which, even though he's not associated with the party every time Colin Craig rocks up in court, I'm sure does them even more damage. The sort of successor of the new Conservative Party, but there is a chunk there. There is a constituency that is to the right of National, and what quite to the right of National means, it could mean one thing or another. But if ACT are in a position to scoop that up, then I think 3 or 4 is not completely out of the question.
No, I think that's right. A lot of it will depend on how National play the election, depending on whether they go more and more oppositional, more conservative, or whether they go with a sort of safe pair of hands like Jacinda, but not haven't failed on all my major policies kind of platform.
Well, they've also got Christopher Luxon.
I feel like he needs a T in there, though.
Luxon.
My phone and others, because I've seen on Twitter, always autocorrects to Luzon, and I don't even know what that is.
Luzon.
Yeah.
Luzon.
Is that the L-O-U-Z-A-N?
Maybe it's a brand.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like some international brand.
I have to say I agree with Jamie Lee Ross when he says that helicoptering in Luxon is something the National Party are doing to fix their Wellington leadership problem. I think he's right there, but where I disagree with him is where he says that that's an insult to the people of Botany and that they won't like it. I think that voters tend to like having MPs that are being spoken about in leadership terms.
Bit of stardust.
They do. A bit of stardust, but also leverage. You know, people like to think that their MP is the leader. It means that they've got more pull in Parliament and that
we'll make Botany's voice heard in a way that isn't just a guttural yell on the desert road during a midnight car drive.
He wouldn't be helicoptered in there anyway. He'd probably be on a 737.
It's probably got free flights. He could save the taxpayer some money. No, well, I actually think it will cause problems within National. You know, Luxon hasn't played this particularly well.
Can I say it feels like, remember when Ricky Martin came out? And we're all like, oh, wow.
Yeah, there's a bombshell and a game changer.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm standing for National, freaky.
Luxon... he has a slightly jarring way of talking, when this kind of, guy who's been in business for a long time and, approaches it in a real sort of, CEO kind of way, says things. He had one quote when he announced his retirement from Air New Zealand where he said, I'm not interested in ideology, I'm not into politics. I'm about, just finding the answer to the question. Looking at a problem and finding the solution. It's like, well, politics isn't really like that. It's not an algorithm or an equation to solve. There's competing interests. There's competing visions of the good.
But that's quite a John Key-ish. He wouldn't necessarily put in the sort of managerial CEO style approach.
No, I don't.
Incrementalism.
No, Key was different. Key was not Key wasn't a process guy.
He was a pragmatist.
Key was always talking about New Zealand values. He was always talking about fairness. He was talking about the underclass. Key had huge reservoirs of emotional intelligence, which as a new candidate he was. I mean, and the way that they came in, it is actually instructive to compare the two.
Yeah.
Luxon is already been is already sort of, well, I don't want to talk about whether I'd be a good future leader or not. I mean, whereas Key was so unassuming when he came in. I remember meeting Key when I was maybe 23, 24 or something. And he had this way of, in his first term as an MP, and everyone who met Key around that time always went away thinking that they were the first person to kind of spot potential in him.
Right.
You'd go away going, wow, people should wise up to how good this guy is, And then by the time everyone thought that, suddenly it was just sort of fait accompli, he'd be the next leader. And without drawing the ire of, his colleagues who had been, leafleting away and, going to meetings for 10 years or whatever, being the Andy Fosters of their electorates, while, Luxon's earning big bucks as the CEO and then, parachuting in from the 747.
So probably a bit of a poison chalice or something too. No, that's the wrong word. What do I mean? But he's sort of being a bit overhyped is not necessarily helpful.
It gives him a lot to live up to, and that's always going to be very hard in your first term.
And it's been quite good, though, for Simon Bridges that the Luxon story, his announcement that he will be standing for candidacy in botany didn't coincide with one of Bridges' bad moments. It's been a pretty good few months for Simon Bridges, and remember in a recent poll, I mean, we'll see I think it was the last Colmar run for TVNZ, Luxon kind of surfaced and you can imagine how humiliating it would
1%,
be
1% the first bombshell
for someone who had just announced their candidacy to come, even within a couple of percent of Simon Bridges. So, I mean, Bridges, even though he's still in single digits and preferred PM, he's having a relatively purple patch, no?
This is certainly his best sustained period since he became the leader, and it coincides with. We're getting pretty late into the year of delivery now.
Yeah.
It's October.
I feel like what's helped him in that regard is because Labour's fucked up so much lately. He kind of hasn't really had to do anything. He hasn't had to pull any rabbits out of the hat. All he's had to do is keep his shit together. It's a bit like Labour last year with him.
That's true. There was that rather embarrassing policy about $3,000 fines for people who left school and went education.
But that's not the first time National have rolled that policy out. I mean, this is. I think people, start to sort of say, "Oh, National are getting really desperate." And say, "Well, National aren't desperate at all. They're just rolling out the same treadmill. The baggage carousel's coming around, and they're picking up the same policy they had in like 2013 or whatever."
Tell you who is desperate. Annabelle Lee, she's looking at her watch anxiously, has to make a dash for it, and so do we all. Is that right, Annabelle? Do you have something else to share?
I've just got to pick up my babies from Pinedale.
42 minutes. Have we been blathering for that long? Ridiculous.
Yeah. We've actually been blathering for longer, but all of the gold that we blathered about at the start, Jose didn't record.
Wasn't recording
you'll arrive
that was the tea.
You'll arrive like 5 minutes late outside the school, and Simon Bridges will be there and send you a $500 ticket.
Thanks for bearing with us, especially my hay fever face. If you want to support Spin-Off Journalism, go and check out our members page. Thanks again to Flick Electric for making this possible. And if you think we're something less than terrible, give us 5 stars on whatever it is that you use the app for the podcast. Thanks.
Just give us 5 stars
Ben.
anyway.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks, listener.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I caught it all with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBit.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.